Listeners, we are going to get to intros, but before we do that, I want to ask Adam. Adam, tell us something about investing in office properties that might surprise us.
Something that might surprise people about office properties is they're highly profitable right now. Most people hear the word office, it's doom and gloom, but I would say the old Warren Buffett adage is go where people are fearful of and stay away from what is popular. So, office has been real nice for us.
Adam, Craig, he is the founding member of CLE Real Estate Group, a real estate investment company located just outside Cleveland, Ohio. After college, Adam began to pursue his passion for real estate investing with the purchase of his first single family property in 2013. Since then, he's completed more than 80 projects and has accumulated a rental portfolio topping $11 million in residential and commercial real estate. Adam, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me, Jonathan. I'm doing really, really good today. Weather's finally warming up here in Cleveland, so that always gives me some more energy.
Adam, you have such a unique and contrarian investing style. I've heard you on multiple podcasts, and we're connected with in a couple different groups. And so I am really looking forward to talking to you about how you are managing to make a bunch of money in this really profitable office property real estate niche. So, why don't we start out by you telling us a little bit more about your background, how you got started in real estate, and what your work looks like today?
So I went to Kent State for college, finance degree. I thought I'd be, selling annuities or maybe a financial analyst. But senior year of college, I started an online business that I won't go too much into, but online retail with the bulk of the sales being on Amazon. That actually did so well that, I said, let's see how far I can take this thing. So I did not graduate college and go to a 9 to 5. I graduated college and went all in with this internet retail business. Luckily, the business was successful. It did very well, especially for a young guy coming out of college. I decided, man, I do not want to go work for the man. I don't want to do the 9 to 5. I really love this self-employment thing. So what happens if something happens to this business? And real estate had always been in the back of my mind. Even through my later years in college, I knew in some fashion I wanted to get into real estate investing. And I would say the success of that business kind of expedited the entire real estate process because I had very low overhead at the time, poured everything into my real estate business.
Cool. So, Amazon business, and you eventually, I don't know if you're still doing your Amazon business. Maybe you are, but we're here to talk about your real estate investing. So, tell me about that first real estate deal, and what does your portfolio look like today?
So the first real estate deal was back in 2013. My Amazon business, the second year in, I was doing just over 6 figures, so I had the money to go, but I didn't have multiple years of documented income, which kind of put a hamper in things. I had to wait a little bit until I was ready to invest. So during that time, books, podcasts, all that stuff. And then in 2013, I pulled the trigger on my first single family home. It was a $50,000 purchase in a suburb just outside Cleveland where I live. A little bit of work. It wasn't a disaster home. I probably put about $8,000 into it. Mold in the basement, carpet and paint. Definitely scared me at the time, but 10 years later, that was a really good investment.
And was that a house that you lived in, or was that like a flip?
That was not. That was a rental house. So I did not flip it, held on to it long term.
And how did you make the transition from residential to now office?
So I did the residential from about 2013 till 2019. I started off doing basic carpet and paint style rentals. Eventually moved into the BRRRR, the Burr method, where I added a lot of value, pulled my money back out each time. And then it was about 2019. I had my first kid, and my home office life had been very productive and quiet. And then when I had my first child, that all changed. So it didn't take long after that first kid to start looking for an office to rent. And then while I was looking for a rental, I found a building that was for sale in my hometown. And it's actually in a real nice little area. In short, I ended up buying that building with the plans of essentially office hacking it. I was going to lease out about 4,000 square feet, occupy about 800 square feet. This was right when COVID was just starting. So in the height of COVID, I was able to fill that building during the height of COVID with some stipulations that tenants can get out of their leases if COVID were to shut them down. And it worked out so well. I was like, man, maybe I should try this again. So I ended up buying a second building. But while this was all happening, the residential market started heating up and everybody was doing it. So I would not say I pivoted into office, retail, commercial because of that, but the timing did work out really well because the deals I was getting from 2013 till 2019 weren't there anymore, and it was fiercely competitive. Unlike the commercial world, where there's a lot more opportunity.
I can relate to your first office building. My first commercial deal was an office building, and I office hacked that, and it went well for me. But I did not catch the office investing bug like you did. So, Adam, tell me, what does your portfolio look like today?
So, just on your point on the office investing bug, I do say office, but I would think we have a pretty good mix of office retail. A lot of strip plazas with retail on the bottom, office up top. We don't necessarily love office; it's profitable for us, but we're looking for warehouse, industrial, office, retail, the whole mix. So, I do have a lot of office space, but that's not what we necessarily are focused on. Wherever the value add is where we'll go. With that said, we're just about to purchase our ninth commercial building since 2020. So I'm averaging about 2 to 3 per year, which on the residential side, I was doing in my height, 8 to 12 single family rehabs a year. I was pulling my hair out. I was running short on cash. It was just chaotic. So it's been very nice to have some economies of scale come in where, I'm doing less projects, but making more money. Therefore, I can focus better on these projects. And of those nine commercial buildings, I have one that's a warehouse. All the rest are a mix of retail and office.
Can you tell me what's your buy box? What market are you buying in? What kind of locations, property size, type, vacancy, leases, that kind of stuff?
Similar to my residential experience, we concentrated in what I would say are like C plus up to B plus areas. The really nice neighborhoods never seemed very profitable. The really bad areas were profitable with lots of headaches. So we kind of always found our niche right in the middle. And I took that same philosophy over to the commercial side. We're buying in a lot of the suburbs of Cleveland. I don't own anything in Cleveland proper, but we haven't found any big value add properties in some of the A or really desirable cities. So that's been our mix so far.
Okay. So value add. And are you looking at vacant properties, occupied properties, expiring leases? What's your business strategy?
Out of the nine properties on the commercial side that I purchased, I think seven of them have been 100% vacant. The two that were not vacant had a lot of vacancy. So it's typical that we are not able to get bank financing on the acquisition because you need, I would say, roughly 70% occupancy or greater in order to get a bank to loan on it. So we're raising private debt on the acquisition. Getting in there, fixing them, filling it with tenants, and then we're refinancing with the bank, similar to what we did on the residential.
So you're not purchasing with bank financing. So you're purchasing with cash.
Yes.
Okay. And what kind of purchase prices are you looking at?
So luckily, we're in the Cleveland market where it's a lot less to play ball in the real estate game. That's why everyone from California and all up the West Coast is trying to invest here. So I would say $500,000 plus or minus maybe $300,000 is our typical all-in purchase plus rehab. And then on the backside, these properties are worth typically between a million and a half, somewhere in that ballpark.
And what is the strategy? Is this a long-term buy and hold cash flow strategy? Is this an add value and sell strategy?
As of right now, my strategies are evolving. I always thought I would buy a ton of single family homes and hold them for 30 or 40 years, and that didn't happen. I'm always looking to see which residential property I may unload next in efforts to accelerate the commercial game. But as of now, I would say these are long term holds. I'm not really looking for a quick exit. I know a lot of investors, including one we know commonly, it likes to get in and get out. But so far, I like owning, getting the cash flow, and long term plays.
And so what's an ideal property that you're looking for? I know you mentioned an interest in industrial. You've got some mixed retail and office, and I think you've got some office only. What's kind of a deal that's straight down the fairway for you right now?
I would say our most common deal is a mini strip plaza with office on the top and retail on the bottom, maybe somewhere around 15,000 square feet. We have more of those than anything else, but we do have a couple of really small buildings and a couple of really big ones that are in excess of 30,000 feet. But it's those strip plazas that seem to be a nice mix of office and retail that we really like.
And what kind of a location do you target with your strips? Do you look at area demographics, traffic counts, things like that?
To an extent, we do, but I've been pretty successful doing my real estate without taking a huge look at the overall demographics or what the area is trending towards. I know a lot of people in the commercial world will try to get in front of maybe a population growth or something to that effect, but we're buying these buildings typically at pennies on the dollar, which means we can fix them up nicely and offer them for a little less than market rent, and we're able to fill them pretty successfully. So that's been our strategy.
And it sounds like your competitive advantage is that you're investing locally. I think people all around the country are, they see the Sun Belt and they see these massive population growth areas, and that's fine to invest there. But it's also fine to invest locally when you've got expert knowledge and a competitive advantage of your local market, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, when I first started real estate back in 2013, I was listening to the Real Estate Guys podcast show, and they were all about population growth, getting the markets that are growing, your Floridas, your Austins, your Phoenixes. So my whole early career, I said, I want to invest out of state. I need to get in some of these markets. And, you fast forward 10 years later, and those people from Austin, California, and Arizona are contacting me and saying, how do I invest in Cleveland? Because our markets don't cash flow, our markets are not affordable, and we just can't play ball. So it's just a little bit ironic that happened. I still think if you position yourself in one of these growing markets, you could do extremely well, but it takes a lot of money to do it.
So you're buying value add deals for pennies on the dollar, as you say. What are some of your favorite strategies for finding great deals?
Again, I keep going back to the residential side. People had asked me all the time back then, and they still ask me today, where are you finding your deals? And I think we've only purchased one off market deal out of more than 80 residential and commercial deals. Everything else has been on the MLS, on market. On the commercial side, most of the properties that I own have been stale listings where I've had my eye on them for months or sometimes years, and I was able to get a lower price just because they were listed so long. And then there were a few properties where the broker probably mispriced it, and I jumped on them within a couple of days of the listing and got them.
Okay. So on market deals. So you're finding great value add deals on market.
I get contacted by Crexy and LoopNet all the time, trying to sell me their intelligence package, contacting all these off-market leads. And I said, I may at some point, but right now I have everything I can handle on market, which is a good problem to have.
So a lot of these properties that you're purchasing are value add. There's a lot of vacancy. You talked about not even being able to finance a lot of the purchases because there's so much vacancy. Let's talk about finding tenants. What are some of your favorite ways to lease up buildings and find tenants?
So where we're at now, I would say most of our tenants are mom and pops. We do have a few franchise tenants and publicly listed tenants, but 90% of them are mom and pops. Because of that, we haven't found as much success. And when I say we, it's me, my wife, some part-time people. I get used to saying we, but it basically is my wife and I. A lot of the properties. I'm sorry, where were we going with that?
So finding tenants.
So finding tenants. So a lot of the tenants that we find are on Facebook. Facebook Marketplace probably gives us 90% of our tenant base. LoopNet and Crexy do play a role, but I find that it's larger entities that are typically looking on there.
And so with these mom and pop tenants, what's the lease structure? Are these typically gross leases? Or are they net leases?
Mostly everything I've done has been gross plus utilities. We don't have much in the triple net. A lot of these tenants are paying anywhere from $700 up to $2,000 a month. They don't always have the ability to weather property tax increases and massive repairs. And we can model our cash flow on base rent plus utilities and do just fine. So as of right now, it's utilities plus rent.
And so as you're doing all these heavy value add properties, what sort of amenities or like what about the property is attracting tenants to these properties? What are you doing to them?
We're just making them Nicer than our competition and offering them for less. A lot of these are class C, I would say. So it's not like we have gyms or coffee shops or restaurants. The amenities are very minor, from updated drinking fountains to waiting area lobbies to wall art to just really sprucing up the place. But I think the brand new carpet and tile and bathrooms is ahead of a lot of the competition for the price range that we're playing in right now. So it doesn't take a lot of amenities in order to attract tenants. But on the leasing side, I grind real hard. It's a couple hours a day. Sometimes I'll spend leasing properties between Facebook and getting back to everyone. And I just don't think a lot of people investing in commercial real estate can rely on a broker to do that kind of work, because the broker has so many clients and it's just not realistic for them to be expected to work as hard for your properties as you're going to work for them.
I totally agree, and it's really tough in these small suite sizes, because some of these, some of the sizes are so small that it's almost not worth the broker's time. That if they're only going to make $500 for leasing up a small executive suite office, it's really hard to get a broker involved in that. And then especially if they have to split it with another broker, so then they're splitting $500 for a 12 or 24-month lease. It's really hard to convince a broker to take that on. But you yourself, that property is going to be so important to you, whereas it's not going to be super important to the broker. And so you yourself are going to be way more motivated to do the things that matter to get that space leased up.
Couldn't agree more. And a lot of people don't understand that, including myself. I expected a lot more out of property managers and brokers. And then after you kind of learn what their business is and how low a lot of them are paid, you realize, like you said, if they have 70 clients, I might be their 65th person they're going to get to when I'm leasing $800 a month spaces. So
I saw I think it might have been an Instagram post from you or a Facebook post where you were doing this pretty heavy rehab. Walls were coming down, and it was almost a full gut, it seemed like, from the picture. Can you talk to me about how you view rehab? And talk to me about your team, do you have a target price per square foot? Because these are some big projects that you're taking on.
yeah, so the team I brought a lot of them from my early days on the residential side. I mean, I've since 2013, I've probably gone through, I don't know, 75 to 100 contractors, and I have maybe 10 of them to show for it. I've lost money, I've been robbed, you name it, I've gone through it. And it made real estate extremely difficult in the early stages when you had all these buffoons working for you. But, luckily I have a great team of guys now for the most part, maybe 8 to 12 guys on any given day working at various properties. In terms of the rehabs, we have taken on some massive projects, but usually at the end of those projects, I ask myself why the hell I did this, because we do have some, I would say, carpet and paint style lease up projects where, we've made as much or more money in less time. But it kind of comes down to what's on the market and what's available when I'm ready for my next deal. If there's not one of those opportunities and we're ready to do a deal, we'll take on a big disaster job. But I much prefer the lease up and carpet paint style ones when they're out there.
Do you have any suggestions on recruiting or working with contractors that are going to be a good fit?
Well, aside from don't give them too much money up front, I never give new contractors any money up front. I'll pay them every single day until I get to know them. But in terms of finding them, I struggled for many years doing this, word of mouth, that kind of thing. But in Cleveland here, and I'm assuming most markets, we have a Facebook group called Northeast Ohio Contractors, and there's very similar ones to it. And that's for the last 3 years how I found all my contractors. I'll just post a job on there with some pictures. Sometimes you get 30 or 40 replies from anyone from, Joe Schmo and a Chuck all the way up to, a bigger company who's looking on there for work. And it's easy to look at their profiles and kind of filter whether they are worth their salt or not. And, I've just had a lot of good relationships start through this Facebook group. So if you're in a community that has these types of Facebook group, I encourage you to get on it.
And so that Facebook group has been effective for you in finding contractors?
Oh yeah, I mean, we just signed a $18,000 exterior paint job for a commercial building, and a very reputable company. And the next closest bid was 24,000, and we wouldn't have found them without this group.
Yeah, I have honestly never considered using Facebook Marketplace or Facebook groups as a way to find contractors. So great tip there. Are you willing to go deep on an interesting deal that you've done recently?
Yeah, sure. So I can go. We did a deal that wasn't super recent, but I guess it's more interesting. So, almost during the height of COVID, found a deal. It was a 16,000 foot strip plaza with Key Bank as the anchor tenant, and it had four other retail locations on the bottom. The restaurant location had been there for 40 years, and they went out of business during COVID. There was only one other tenant on the bottom, and the entire second floor was office space that needed a complete rehab that was vacant. So we ended up picking up a 16,000 square foot building for $350,000. I posted the project on my Instagram at the time, and the comments. I've thought about making a separate post years later just to show what people do think. But the comments said, way to go buying office and restaurant during COVID, you idiot, and just bashing me. Um, but that project was going to take us about a year in order to get it turned around, and we assumed that by the time we were ready to lease, COVID would hopefully be done, and it wasn't done, but people were certainly getting back to work and getting back to businesses. Restaurants were opening back up, so we bought the building with about $6,000 a month cash flow. It's currently cash flow. I'm sorry, $6,000 a month rent. It's currently bringing in about $16,000 a month. We paid $350 for it. Put about $200,000 into it, so our all-in was roughly $550. It appraised for $1.1 million within 18 months of us purchasing it. So it was a great deal, and we snagged a few other real good ones during COVID. And again, the Warren Buffett quote: "Be greedy when others are fearful." Everyone was fearful of office and restaurant at the time, but we picked up some great properties.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of us looking back in 2020 and 2021, really 2020, we could have and maybe should have made some different investing decisions. Um, and this one sounds like it turned out great for you. Uh, I want to ask you about risk because this is a pattern or theme that I see coming up with you. You seem fearless. And so when these people on Facebook are calling you an idiot for buying restaurant and office during COVID, is there any part of you that says like, wow, maybe this is kind of risky, or buying a vacant office building, or these heavy value adds with cash? How do you view the risk profile of the deals that you're doing?
Well, it was baby steps, just like on the residential side. I started with 4,000, went to 8,000, and then that 16,000 I was telling you about, and now we're buying a bunch of 30,000. So incrementally, got more expensive in bigger buildings. But I would say the types of deals I do are risky, but I would say they're considerably less risky than buying a building at market value and expecting to do well with it. I'm helping some financial partners of mine on a building that with another building they own. These guys are from California. They bought a building that looked turnkey ready. The rent roll looked shiny, and they're bleeding money on this building because the rent roll was as shiny as it was ever going to get. It was probably a fabricated rent roll at best, and they paid top dollar for it. So it was a terrible investment. What looked like a turnkey investment they're trying to get out of, and they can't because they're underwater.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting perspective. That there's some risk in buying a stabilized property, especially if you're not super experienced, or the stabilized property isn't as stabilized as you think it is, or if you're buying at the top and there's nothing else you can do to add value. And so that's a really interesting perspective. And then something else that I thought of while you were talking is success breeds confidence. And so you started with those smaller properties and you had success with them, and you get more confident. And then you do slightly bigger and slightly bigger and slightly bigger. And then now you're buying 30,000 square foot properties. And you probably have a certain amount of confidence that you're going to figure it out, that you might encounter something that is unexpected or you haven't seen before, but you have enough experience at this point that you're going to figure it out, right?
The experience and the portfolio to kind of weather some storms. I do have a portfolio of 30 single family homes and 9 commercial buildings, and the cash flow from that's pretty significant. So going into these, I know that at least I have that as a backdrop to help me through some cash crunches. I could always unload a property. Without that in the back of my mind, these would feel a lot more risky, but knowing that I can cash out on something to help weather a storm really helps.
I have to ask you about management too. You have, Adam, you have a really impressive portfolio with all of your residential and your commercial. Talk to me about management. You said it's you and your wife and maybe some part time help. Can you talk to me about some of your management strategies for handling all this real estate?
So getting into this in 2013, I still had my internet business, and I never thought I would be a full-time real estate investor. It was always do my business, let property managers handle all the work. I'm going to do this passively, long-term play. Probably about 4 years into it, I was getting such bad service from my property manager, and to be honest, I was not cash flowing as much as I wanted to. So I said, let's give this a try. So I unloaded a handful of properties from my property management manager, and I started managing those myself. And what I quickly found out was that I do know now that I didn't know then is all the incentives for property managers and owners are misaligned. A property they were marking for 1,100, I put up for 1,300, and I rented it in a few days. So I talked to a property manager that wasn't working for me, and I told them about it, and they said, the amount of money a property manager can make on a $1,300 property or an $1,100 property is minimal. They are interested in leasing it quickly so they don't have to do a bunch of showings and collecting their first month's rent, and then they get their monthly after that. So once you start realizing how many incentives are misaligned between owners and property managers, another one, for instance, is property managers in most firms get late fees. What sense does that make? They have no incentive to try to get your tenant to pay on time when they're collecting the late fees. So we started managing it, and it was 100 times better in terms of cash flow, efficiency, and all that. So I decided I got to get my systems in place. A lot of those systems I borrowed or I learned from my existing property manager, and then I kind of modified them to fit my needs. So we got a lot of experience watching them do it, and a lot of it was just hands-on experience after starting.
And so, do you have any property managers currently?
I have a part-time guy that works for me for about 5 hours a week. He helps coordinate all the maintenance calls. So he'll deal directly with my handyman to pretty much leave me out of 90% of the work orders.
Okay, so that was going to be one of my questions. So, in all these residential and even the commercial, if you've got leaky faucets and all the stuff that can go wrong with properties, where do those calls or texts or notifications come into?
So property management software has been a game changer for everyone in real estate. I couldn't imagine, doing this in the 90s. But all our tenants are hooked up with our property management software. So any maintenance issues get submitted straight to there. You can have your employee or just about anyone get those on their phone. You could have a contractor get those on their phone. So with that software, we're able to coordinate everything pretty well. And my part-time guy gets those calls. He knows which guy to dish them out to. And then maybe on 10% of those calls, I have to jump in for one reason or another. But for the most part, he can handle it.
Would you rather have more of your residential properties or more of your commercial properties right now?
In terms of management, I would say the commercial properties, they're way less management intensive. But with the appreciation that's taken place over the last 5 years, I was just looking at updating my portfolio value sheet, and I couldn't believe some of the numbers some of these houses are selling at. So, the appreciation on residential is no joke. On the commercial side, a lot of the value is derived based on rents. So if you're not raising rents on the commercial properties, which we do, but maybe not to the extent that an Austin, Texas, or a very popular market would be able to do. So I'm not saying these commercial properties are not appreciating, but they may be appreciating at a slower rate than the residential ones.
So that was more of a broad question, not just on management, but yeah, overall, because I think you bring up a really interesting point about appreciation. I was just listening to some podcast where I was hearing about a Cleveland real estate agent talking about the residential real estate market in Cleveland being really hot right now, and there being still being multiple offers and properties going over asking price. And I'm like, seriously, in Cleveland? But it sounds like it is an attractive market.
I mean, yeah, again, those real estate guys I listened to in 2013, I could have never guessed that Cleveland would be at the top of Zillow's 2024 list for hottest markets. I made an Instagram post about it earlier this year. A lot of the Midwest cities are now at the top of the list because the only thing I can gather is, people are finally sick of making heavy six-figure income on the West Coast and feeling broke. So I've talked to people that have moved to Cleveland from those areas, and they said exactly that. They can live here, they can afford things here, and the reputation of Cleveland has changed. It's never going to be your Miami's or anything like that, but it's a nice place to live, and you can afford to live here.
You have beaches in Cleveland, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, Lake Erie, it's a beaut.
Um,
I always tell
so
my wife if you blur your eyes and you plug your nose, it's just like the ocean.
So it sounds to me like you kind of have a healthy mix of commercial, which can provide some cash flow and some easy management, with your residential, which provides some really nice upside and appreciation. I don't know if you planned it that way, but it seems like that's kind of how it's working out.
I didn't plan it that way, and honestly, I'm always looking to exit some of my residentials in hopes to maybe trade up for some commercials. And it doesn't mean that the residential isn't profitable. It's extremely profitable, but it's competitive. I don't want to invest a lot of energy into residential anymore because I don't feel the value add apart. I would probably be looking for apartments at this stage in my career. I don't feel the value add component is there. It's still rents are high, property values are high, and I think I can do a lot better in a less competitive space on the commercial side.
Yeah. Yeah. Really interesting. Most people get their start in single family, and you learn some really important lessons with those smaller residential properties, but then you realize that it's really hard to scale them. I mean, I think you said you have 30 single family homes, which is really impressive. And to me, sounds like a huge headache, but it sounds like, from your perspective, you've grown a significant amount of equity and have learned a ton of lessons, and it's really worked out well for you.
It has. I have a lot of guys that are just starting off, or maybe they're 3 or 4 years in, and we're good colleagues and we get together a lot. But some of these guys are, selling their properties after 2 or 3 years for cash crunch reasons, or because they've appreciated, or one reason or another. But I keep telling them, buy and hold, buy and hold, buy and hold, because the real money is made after, it's a slow snowball rolling down a hill, but eventually it gets big and it goes faster. So you have to hold your properties.
All right, Adam, we are getting towards the tail end of our conversation. I have a few more questions for you. They're designed to be quick hitting questions, but if you've got a great story to tell, feel free to take your time. So, first, if you could 10x a certain part of your business, what would that be and why?
If I could 10x a certain part of my business, it would probably be fundraising. On the residential side, it was hard money lenders, 14% interest. You pay them back in 6 to 9 months after you rehab it and get a tenant, and then the bank has the loan. On the commercial side, the numbers are so big that the hard money 14, 15% is really hard to weather when you don't have a lot of income. So I've been raising private capital for that, offering somewhere in the 9 to 10% range, and you can never have enough money in real estate. So raising capital would definitely be the portion of my business I'd like to 10x.
What's the best deal you've ever done?
The best deal I ever done is very similar, or it probably is that deal I told you about that we bought during COVID. We probably 2x or 2.5x the value of that property. It cash flows roughly $6,000 to $7,000 a month, and it only took us 550,000 to get into it.
And was that a property that had been on the market for a long time, or how were you able to lock that one down?
That was one of the properties that actually had not. The broker, a lot of the properties we have purchased have been receiverships where the owner dies, the kids inherit it, the kids aren't even in state, they want to unload it. This was the same exact scenario on this one. So we jumped on this one quickly. Brokers probably blow smoke all the time, but they said they had California money offers coming in after ours was accepted that were considerably higher than what we had on the table. So we were happy to lock that one up.
What's the worst deal that you've done?
Worst deal was probably a single family I did maybe in 2018, 2017. It was just a combination of a house that needed a ton of work, a lot of new contractors that I didn't know. There was stealing, there was drugs, there was bad work, there was break-ins. One of the contractors broke in after we were done with the house, and they stole the staging furniture and they stole the appliances, and we lost money on it. So that was the worst deal.
What's your takeaway or lesson from that?
I think the takeaway on that one is don't go too fast. I was in over my head. I was doing too much. I couldn't manage things correctly, so I was hiring guys that I shouldn't have. And at the it's exciting to go fast, but in the end, it's better to slow and steady wins the race.
What's your best tip for raising capital?
Get on social media. I knew as I got into commercial that hard money wasn't going to really be an option. I didn't want to be on social media showing everything I did. I had no care or concern to do that. But I knew if I was going to be raising capital, people had to go somewhere and see I knew what I was doing. So Instagram, Facebook, website, I kind of went all in with that. And it's helped me a lot because now my investors, potential investors, can look at those and say, okay, I see the history. I see what he's doing day to day. He's legit. He's not some guy trying to take my money. So having a social media presence is important.
I want to ask you a little bit more about that. I really connected with what you said that you don't have any desire to be like on social media every single day and posting daily. I'm 100% with you there. So, do you view your social media as more of a portfolio, like for someone who has a question about you to look you up and then they can look at your feed rather than being there every single day?
And I do. And I had a hard time getting into it because most of it had to do with my immediate network of family and friends. I didn't want to show that I was bragging. But unfortunately, in order to attract investors and in order to show people you know what you're doing, you have to share or you should share some numbers. And with that, it looks like maybe you are showing off or doing something to that effect. But when I talked to Ash and I talked to other people who talked about it, he said, that's not your audience. Those people can think what they want to think, but big picture focused, you're tailoring to the strangers who don't know you. So I kind of took that philosophy, and the people that know me hopefully know that I am not like that. But sometimes it may appear that's the case, but really I'm not the guy standing in front of a corporate jet that you see on Instagram or anything like that. I'm sharing my deals, I'm sharing the numbers, and I'm just trying to show that I have experience.
Are there any habits or daily practices that are especially impactful for you?
I mean, it seems obvious, but continued education. I went from reading real estate books to the point where they were so exhausting and repetitive that I don't read real estate books anymore. But every time I'm driving in the car for the last few years, I've really gotten on YouTube, and I will listen to anything from documentaries to self-help to the Financial Times to what the Fed is doing. I'm just trying to be in tune, not only with finance, but geopolitics and everything that could affect the economy and the business down the road.
Are there any resources that are especially impactful or influential on you right now, whether it is a YouTube channel, podcast, book?
I wouldn't say there's one that stands out at the moment. Bigger Pockets was a huge help to me over the years. I think it's been highly commercialized over the last 10 years that I've been on it, and I wouldn't say it's as helpful, but that's a big one for new people to get on. Other than that, it sounds generic, but local real estate meetups, I've rubbed shoulders with, new people and experienced people that, one guy, we got a cup of coffee, and then 3 years later, we partnered on a deal. So you never know where something like that's going to lead.
Adam, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. If listeners want to connect with you, where would you like to send people?
I'm on Instagram. It's Adam the Investor, and I also have a website, cleinvest.com.
Adam, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
Listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, reach out to either one of us. We love talking about commercial real estate, and we would love to connect with you. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you. Until next time, take care.